On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Anne Morgan Gilbert, beloved for her portrayal of Millie Helper on The Dick Van Dyke Show, and later as the feisty Jetta Rosenberg on The Nanny, passed away from cancer on June 14, 2016, at the age of 87. Her death came quietly, devoid of the media frenzy that often surrounds celebrity deaths, yet it marked the end of a remarkable era in television history, one rooted in authenticity, character-driven comedy, and generational shifts in how women were portrayed on screen. Gilbert's death reflected the quiet strength and resilience that defined not only her career, but also her generation of performers. She began acting during a time when television was still finding its voice in American culture. The early 1960s, when she rose to fame as Millie Helper, were a time of domestic ideals and suburban narratives, and her character, a chatty, good-hearted neighbor, embodied the familiar and comforting presence that network TV thrived on. Decades later, her role as Jetta, the eccentric grandmother with a cloud of smoke and a sharp wit, celebrated the liberation and humor of aging, offering a refreshing alternative to how older women were typically depicted. The immediate aftermath of her passing was a heartfelt wave of tributes from fans and co-stars alike, who praised not only her comic timing, but her warmth and generosity off-screen. While Gilbert may not have shifted the trajectory of entertainment history alone, her consistent presence in iconic shows served as a bridge between two defining eras of American television. Her death reminded audiences of the enduring power of character actors, those who, often without the spotlight of stardom, create the fabric of beloved narratives. In death, Anne Morgan Gilbert's legend gently expanded. She became a symbol of the unsung heroism in Hollywood. The actors who, through steady, unglamorous excellence, shaped the emotional core of the stories we return to time and again. Her legacy persists not in monuments but in reruns, fan memories, and the continuing evolution of strong, nuanced female characters in comedy. Her passing invites reflection on how we honor the people who make art feel human. Through remembrance, tribute performances, and continued audience affection, Gilbert is immortalized as not just a character on a screen, but a treasured presence in the collective cultural heart. J Lerner, one of the most celebrated lyricists and librettists of the American musical theater, died of lung cancer on June 14, 1986, at the age of 67. His death came at a time when the golden era of Broadway, the era he helped define, was already fading, replaced by mega musicals and increasingly commercial productions. The manner of his passing, a natural one complicated by a lifelong struggle with health and finances, mirrored the complexities of his life. A man of extraordinary artistic brilliance, often shadowed by personal and professional turmoil. Lerner's contributions to musical theater, especially his legendary collaborations with composer Frederick Loewe, shaped some of the 20th century's most enduring works. From My Fair Lady to Camelot to Gigi, his lyrics captured the aspirations, wit, and heartbreak of post-war America and beyond. His artistry reflected the cultural optimism of the 1950s and 60s, when musical theater was not just entertainment, but a mirror of societal change. His death, therefore, was not only the loss of a singular voice, but also a symbolic closing curtain on a particular vision of Broadway, intimate, elegant, and literary. The immediate aftermath of his death saw tributes from artists, critics, and audiences who had been moved by his words. Yet it also prompted reflection on the fragility of artistic legacies. Despite his monumental achievements, Lerner died in financial distress, a reminder of the precarious nature of creative success in a commercial industry. His death served as a cautionary tale and a tribute, highlighting both the heights of acclaim and the personal cost of chasing artistic immortality. Lerner's legend, however, only deepened after his passing. His works continue to be performed around the world, his lyrics studied for their lyrical sophistication and emotional depth. In art and academia alike, Lerner is remembered not merely as a lyricist, but as a poet of the stage who brought humanity to grand productions. His death invites reflection on how we remember artists, not only for their finished masterpieces, but also for the passions and struggles behind them. Through revivals, biographies, and recordings, Alan J. Lerner remains immortalized. His words, often sung but just as powerful on the page, endure as echoes of an era when music and storytelling danced in perfect harmony. Max Weber, one of the foundational figures in sociology and political economy, died of pneumonia on June 14, 1920, at the age of 56 in Munich, Germany. His death, resulting from complications related to the Spanish flu pandemic that had ravaged the globe since 1918, reflected the fragility of intellectual life amid the broader upheaval of post-World War I Europe. Germany, reeling from defeat and the collapse of the Kaiserreich, was a society searching for new forms of authority and meaning, an environment Weber had spent his career trying to understand and shape. Weber's death came just as he was cementing his legacy as a thinker who bridged the 19th and 20th centuries. His ideas about bureaucracy, rationalization, and the Protestant ethic had begun to challenge and redefine the way Western societies viewed the rise of capitalism and the role of individual values within modern systems. The irony of his passing, succumbing to illness during a pandemic that blurred boundaries between science, state, and existential dread, paralleled his own inquiries into how modernity replaces traditional structures with impersonal institutions. The immediate consequences of his death were a deep sense of loss among his academic peers and students. He had been involved in shaping Germany's fledgling Weimar Republic and was a voice for rational, constitutional democracy during a time of intense polarization. Without his continued influence, some feared the Republic would lack the moral and sociological insight necessary to weather the coming storms, fears that would prove prophetic in the turbulent decades ahead. Weber's death did not instantly amplify his legend, but over time, it contributed to the mystique of a scholar whose insights seemed to foresee the bureaucratic and ideological machinery of the 20th century. His work gained renewed significance during the mid-century social sciences boom and became essential reading for anyone seeking to understand modernity, authority, and the complexities of social organization. His passing reminds us how thinkers often gain immortality not through public mourning, but through the endurance of their ideas. We immortalize Weber through university syllabi, academic journals, and global institutions shaped directly or indirectly by his theories. In death, as in life, he continues to provoke critical reflection on power, faith, and reason, inviting each generation to question the structures they inherit and inhabit. Henry Mancini, one of the most influential composers in 20th century American music, died of pancreatic cancer on June 14, 1994, at the age of 70. His death was the quiet end to a career that had brought elegance, innovation, and emotional resonance to film and television music. At a time when Hollywood was evolving from the studio era into blockbuster modernity, Mancini's passing signaled the loss of a musical voice that had managed to merge classical sophistication with pop sensibility. Mancini's compositions, such as Moon River, the Pink Panther theme, and Peter Gunn, defined a generation's soundscape. He didn't merely write background music, he elevated the soundtrack into an integral storytelling device, shaping mood, character, and identity through melody. The nature of his death, natural, graceful, and relatively private, reflected the character of his work: refined, accessible, and enduring. It also echoed a broader cultural shift from the golden age of orchestral film scores to increasingly digital, synthesized compositions. The immediate aftermath of his passing was a cascade of tributes from composers, filmmakers, and musicians. His influence was not just technical, but emotional. He had shown that popular music could carry subtlety, and that film scores could be both artistically rich and widely beloved. The film and music industries marked his death with reverence, not only mourning his absence but also celebrating a body of work that continued to influence soundtracks for decades to come. While Mancini's death didn't drastically shift the course of history, it did amplify his legend. His work, already highly decorated with Grammys, Oscars, and Golden Globes, took on new meaning as it was reintroduced to younger generations. Through documentaries, tribute concerts, and re-releases, Mancini's melodies found immortality not just in nostalgic remembrance, but in the continued evolution of cinematic music. Mancini's passing invites reflection on how we memorialize artists whose work becomes part of our emotional vocabulary. We remember him through performances, through the unmistakable notes of Baby Elephant Walk, or the romantic lilt of Two for the Road. In commemorating such figures, we acknowledge the subtle power of art to shape memory, to soothe, and to connect. His death, like his music, was a quiet crescendo, an ending that lingers not in silence, but in song. Emmeline Pankhurst, the indomitable leader of the British suffragette movement, died on June 14, 1928 in London at the age of 69. Her death, due to ill health exacerbated by years of political imprisonment, hunger strikes, and relentless activism, came just weeks before the Representation of the People Act passed, finally granting women in Britain equal voting rights with men. The timing of her death was poetic and symbolic. The warrior passed just as the war she had fought so long was won. Pankhurst's final years had seen her navigating a dramatically changed political landscape. After decades of militant protest, arrests, and public vilification, she had softened her tactics during World War I, focusing on supporting the war effort to demonstrate women's value to the nation. This strategic pivot reflected the era's values: loyalty to country, the role of women in public service, and the slow, grudging expansion of democratic principles. Her death from natural causes may not have shocked the public, but it marked the end of an era defined by defiance, discipline, and the demand for dignity. The immediate consequences of her death were profound within the suffrage community. While the vote had not yet been fully secured for all women during most of her active years, her passing shortly before the Equal Franchise Act served as both a symbolic closure and a rallying moment. Newspapers paid tribute, former critics offered praise, and women across the United Kingdom mourned the loss of a leader who had dared to challenge the patriarchal order of Edwardian Britain. Her death undoubtedly amplified her legend. Though she had faced fierce criticism during her lifetime, sometimes from within the women's movement, her legacy quickly evolved into that of a national heroine. Statues were erected, biographies written, and her image etched into the collective memory of British political history. Pankhurst became a symbol not only of women's suffrage, but of the broader human struggle for justice and equality. In reflecting on Pankhurst's death, we are reminded of how mortality often clarifies legacy. Power fades, but memory endures when tied to principle and sacrifice. Through art, literature, and public commemoration, we do not simply remember Emmeline Pankhurst. We carry forward the cause she gave her life to. Her story is not just a chapter in women's history, it is a testament to the human will to be heard. Jorge Luis Borges, the Argentine writer whose labyrinthine imagination redefined literature in the 20th century, died of liver cancer on June 14, 1986, in Geneva, Switzerland, at the age of 86. His passing was quiet, free of spectacle, much like the man himself, reserved, introspective, and more interested in metaphysical paradoxes than political noise. Yet the timing and setting of his death were not without symbolic weight. Borges chose to die in Geneva, the city he loved for its neutrality and order, far from the turbulence of Argentina's political landscape. Borges had long suffered from congenital blindness, a condition that shaped his deep reverence for language, memory, and the invisible architecture of thought. His work, riddled with mirrors, infinite libraries, and imaginary books, reflected not only a personal grappling with perception and knowledge, but also the global disillusionment of the 20th century. In an era marked by authoritarian regimes, world wars, and the failure of grand ideologies, Borges offered literature that reveled in ambiguity, reminding readers that truth is often as elusive as time itself. His death marked the end of a literary epoch in Latin America, which had seen a surge in international recognition through figures like Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Mario Vargas Llosa. Yet Borges stood apart, less concerned with magical realism than with the magic of realism itself. The immediate aftermath of his death was a wave of tributes from across the literary world, recognizing not just the depth of his intellect, but the originality of his vision. Though he never received the Nobel Prize, a lifelong frustration for many of his admirers, his reputation only grew after death, as his work continued to challenge and inspire readers globally. Borges's passing amplified his legend not through martyrdom or public drama, but through the quiet echo of his enduring themes, the fragility of memory, the looping nature of time, and the strange beauty of intellectual solitude. His death prompts reflection on how humanity seeks permanence through art, even while confronting the limits of understanding. We immortalize Borges not with statues or national holidays, but with rereadings. His stories, compact universes of logic and imagination, live on as riddles we are forever attempting to solve. In remembering Borges, we confront the mystery of mortality with wonder, not fear. Richard Jackel, the quintessential American character actor known for his rugged roles in war films and westerns, died of cancer on June 14, 1997, at the age of 70. His death, though natural and quietly acknowledged in the public eye, underscored a broader cultural shift, the fading of Hollywood's golden age of tough, blue-collar masculinity that Jackel had embodied for decades. Having begun his career as a teenager in Guadalcanal Diary, 1943, Jackel became a reliable presence in more than 70 films and countless television appearances. He specialized in portraying soldiers, cowboys, and men hardened by experience, roles that mirrored America's post-World War II fascination with heroism, moral grit, and patriotic resolve. His death came at a time when such archetypes were being increasingly deconstructed in cinema, replaced by more complex or ironic interpretations of masculinity. In this way, Jackel's passing marked not only the loss of a prolific actor, but also the quiet end of a certain kind of American cinematic identity. Though Jackel was never a headlining star, the immediate response to his death from fans and industry colleagues revealed a deep respect for his craft and the authenticity he brought to the screen. His 1971 Academy Award nomination for Sometimes a Great Notion had validated his stature as more than just a dependable side character. He was a cornerstone of the worlds he helped build. In an era increasingly driven by celebrity over substance, Jackel represented the value of dedication, humility, and perseverance. His legacy lives on not in monuments or best-selling biographies, but in the texture he added to every film he graced. He was the kind of actor who made stories believable, grounding grand narratives in human reality. Through his work, we are reminded that history is not only shaped by those in the spotlight, but also by those who stand just behind it, steadfast and essential. Richard Jackel's death encourages us to consider how we remember those who reflect our cultural ideals in quiet ways. We immortalize such figures not with fanfare, but through the continued relevance of the roles they played and the values they represented. In his passing, we honor the unspoken dignity of lives lived with purpose, even when the spotlight fades. Pete de Freitas, the charismatic and rhythmically electrifying drummer of Echo and the Bunnymen, died in a tragic motorcycle accident on June 14, 1989, at the age of 27. Riding his Ducati motorbike on a country road near Staffordshire, England, he collided with a car, ending his life abruptly and violently. His death stunned fans and the music community, not only because of his youth and talent, but because it felt emblematic of the fragile brilliance that often defines rock and roll's mythos. De Freitas had helped shape the sound of one of Britain's most influential post-punk bands. With a drumming style that was at once tribal, atmospheric, and driving, he brought a spiritual intensity to the band's dark, poetic sound. In the 1980s, a decade marked by both synthetic gloss and underground rebellion, his raw, passionate playing stood as a reminder of music's emotional core. His death, then, reflected both the era's creative energy and its precariousness, an age where brilliance burned quickly, often at great cost. The immediate consequence of his death was a sense of loss not only for Echo and the Bunnymen, who were attempting to regroup after earlier internal changes, but for a generation that saw in their music a form of catharsis. The band, still reeling from former lead singer Ian McCulloch's departure the previous year, was shaken to its core. While they continued to perform and record, many fans felt that a vital spark had been irretrievably lost with Pete's passing. His death did not shift the broad trajectory of music history, but it did add to the tragic legend of the band and underscored a haunting theme: the cost of intensity. Like many musicians who died young, often symbolically at 27, de Freitas became part of a quiet pantheon of artists frozen in time, their work forever echoing the promise of what could have been. In the years since, Pete de Freitas has been remembered through tributes, anniversary performances, and the enduring influence of Echo and the Bunnymen's classic albums. His story reminds us that while power may come and go, memory persists. Through music, we immortalize those who speak to our deeper selves, and in doing so, we confront mortality with rhythm, poetry, and a beat that refuses to fade. Francis Matthews, the distinguished English actor best known for voicing the titular character in Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, and portraying suave, debonair leads in numerous film and television roles, passed away from natural causes on June 14, 2014, at the age of 86. His death marked the quiet departure of a performer whose career subtly mirrored the evolution of British entertainment, from post-war optimism to the sleek futurism of 1960s television and beyond. Matthews' work in the 1960s, particularly his collaboration with Jerry and Sylvia Anderson on Captain Scarlet, coincided with a period of profound social and technological transformation in the UK. Britain, shedding the last remnants of empire and grappling with Cold War tensions, found in its pop culture both escapism and futuristic vision. Matthews' velvet-voiced Scarlet, a hero reconstructed from death to battle an invisible enemy, symbolized resilience and control in an era anxious about annihilation and identity. His voice, famously modeled after Cary Grant, lent a transatlantic elegance to a distinctly British production, bridging old-world charm with modern flair. His death did not send shockwaves through headlines, but it was marked by fond remembrance among fans and colleagues who recognized his contributions to a unique era of television storytelling. For those who grew up with the Supermarionation classics, Matthews was the voice of stoicism and cool courage. His passing prompted a nostalgic reflection on the ingenuity and earnestness of mid-20th century British sci-fi, a genre built less on spectacle and more on imaginative narrative and symbolic conflict. Though not a household name in the mold of larger-than-life film stars, Matthews carved a legacy that endures through dedicated fan communities and the ongoing availability of his work in digital archives. His performances live on in reruns, documentaries, and conventions, celebrated by those who appreciate the artistry of voice and subtle acting. He represents the countless performers whose consistent, dignified work formed the backbone of popular culture. In remembering Francis Matthews, we confront mortality not through tragedy, but through the quiet persistence of memory. His life and death remind us that legacy is not always measured in fame, but in the echo of a voice that once gave life to imagination. We honor such figures not only in film credits, but in the personal memories and cultural myths they help construct, resonating across time like a familiar, comforting voice in the dark.